Pentagon Jr. versus Vampiro. Two men who both became global sensations in the world of Lucha Libre in their own conventional ways. They met for the first and only singles match in the short-lived Lucha Underground promotion in what would be Vampiro's first singles match in the United States in years, and arguably the match that fully established Pentagon as a household name in North America at the conclusion of the show's inaugural season. A match coupled with a story that would ultimately bleed into the entire show from its start to finish and have an undeniable impact on everybody involved's legacy, and that is what we will be discussing in today's video. This video was decided by a poll where out of over 1,000 votes, this was the overwhelming winner. If you would like to possibly influence any future videos, keep an eye out in the community tab for more polls like this, and if you would like to corrupt democracy for your own vote, as the $1 Million Man said, everybody's got a price. If you do enjoy this video and you want to see more videos about all the random and cool stuff that comes from pro wrestling, be sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. With that being said, let's get right into it. Now, I won't be delving too much into the background of Pentagon Jr. I've talked about his rise to prominence in 2 prior videos, and he's been one of the most popular names in all of professional wrestling the past decade, so I don't feel it's completely necessary to do so right now. I do, however, have to talk about the rise of one Vampiro. Real name Ian Hodgkinson. He was born in Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada on May 31st, 1967. Growing up, Ian was a self-professed prodigy in the sport of hockey, so much so that he would even go on to be drafted in the 10th round of the Ontario Hockey League draft in 1984 at age 16 by the Kingston Canadians as a goaltender. Although he was good enough to be drafted by one of the premier junior leagues in all of Canada, it seems that Ian wasn't the most passionate about the sport. According to the man himself, he had his vices. Some people used alcohol, drugs, or some other vice to cope. Ian used violence. Therefore, hockey, notoriously one of the more rough sports that you could play, seemed like a natural next step for him. However, after some time, it was obvious that Ian did not want to be a part of it any longer. Soon after, he would leave the game of hockey behind and began training in Montreal for a career in professional wrestling. He claimed to have been trained by notable hardcore wrestler and fellow Canadian Abdullah the Butcher, and worked the Canadian scene sporadically from then until 1991, where he met Antonio Pena, then promoter of CMLL and future founder of AAA, alongside CMLL's owner Paco Alonso outside of Arena, Mexico, which Ian mistook for a gymnasium. They didn't see a lot in what was standing right in front of them, looking at a 23 to 24-year-old Ian with his dyed purple dreadlocks and tattoos out the ass, but they decided to give him a shot anyways.
So when I got to Los Angeles, I went to Mexico. When I was kind of being discovered, I was kind of in the parking lot of the Arena Mexico, and I thought it was like a gymnasium. I wanted to go shower and work out. I had no idea that it was actually the Arena Mexico and what it stood for. So when I was talking to them in the parking lot, I had long purple hair and the tattoos and all that kind of stuff, and I was super, super white and skinny and tall, like a vampire, that kind of thing. And when he said, "Where are you from?" And Canada. And what is it? Why do you like vampires so much? Because you saw the back of my jacket. And then he said, "You're the Canadian vampire." And the wrestling community took it as a joke. And it was treated as a joke. It was like that because it had nothing to do with wrestling. I had no clue. By 3 or 4 matches, the culture instantly changed.
With the name Vampiro Canadiense, I think I pronounced that right, I'm sorry, I'm white, Spanish for Canadian vampires, since Ian had told them how much he liked vampires, they sent him out there half expecting him to fall flat on his face in one of wrestling's most prestigious venues. But the exact opposite would happen. Almost instantly, Vampiro would become one of the most popular acts in all of Mexico, primarily due to his unique rock star-like appearance and conventional good looks attracting a young female audience. His ring work was limited, as to be expected, but as we've seen countless times throughout wrestling history, it doesn't matter how deep your moveset is to a major audience if you cannot connect with them. For example, Dean Malenko is widely considered one of the most technically gifted wrestlers of all time, and he never connected to an audience the way someone like Vampiro did in Mexico. Being able to wrestle, needless to say, is an extremely important thing for wrestling, but being able to connect and resonate with the crowd to the point that you could sell tickets and t-shirts is what promoters are looking for, especially in Mexico. Against some pretty stacked odds, he conquered CMLL, and became one of the biggest stars in all of Mexico during his 7 years with the company. His time with the company came to an end December of 1998 and began working for WCW even before that. He was there until the company's closure in 2001, worked against a myriad of different wrestlers like Raven, the Insane Clown Posse, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio Jr., long-standing real-life rival Conan, had a very notable feud with Sting, Great Muta, with whom he'd win the tag titles, among many others. His last WCW matches took place August and October of 2000, taking 2 awesome bumps from Mike Awesome on back-to-back nights and suffering both a concussion and a broken neck that took him out of action for over 6 months. By the time he had recovered, WCW had been purchased by Vince McMahon, there were no plans for him to appear on WWF television, and his contract was not picked up, which was a-okay in Vampiro's book considering he wasn't going to come back to WCW at the conclusion of his contract anyways. In life post-WCW, he went back to CMLL, he continued working at AAA a little bit, he worked a plethora of dates in All Japan, he was there for the short-lived Jimmy Hart ran XWF promotion that didn't last very long, he wrestled for the then brand new MLW, NWA TNA, IWA Mid-South. Perhaps the most notable dates in America that he was a part of took place for Juggalo Championship Wrestling, where he won their world title 3 times among countless other indie promotions across the globe. By 2014, Vampiro's workload in ring began to decrease, wrestling between 5 to 14 matches a year beginning in 2008, and to me, that's completely understandable. Vampiro by this point was approaching his 40s, and a lot of wrestlers around this point, with how they treated their bodies in the last 10, 15, 20 years prior, their bodies began to break down on them. He was constantly feeling the effects of the rockstar lifestyle pro wrestlers led during the 80s and 90s, and there was decades of damage done to his body coupled with heavy drug abuse. He never truly retired, but he did considerably slow down, accepting a role to do color commentary for the brand new Lucha Underground TV show on both the English and Spanish sides of the broadcast. The Lucha Underground roster consisted of a bunch of talent that appeared in AAA and the independent scene in the US. I've gone down the list before, so I will refrain from doing so now, but one of those names, of course, was Pentagon Jr. In the very beginning of Lucha Underground, Pentagon was booked, simply put, like a geek. He lost many of his beginning matches. He did the Cero Miedo gimmick with absolutely no reaction from the crowd. He did not have anything going for him in the slightest. He came back weeks later making promises of sacrifices and success to his master, which would lead him breaking the arms of many lower card wrestlers to complete these sacrifices. Vampiro would be on commentary condemning Pentagon's actions. This would become a slow burn where he would break arms every week, with Vampiro getting closer and closer to taking action. The closest he got at the time was when Pentagon was going to break the arm of ring announcer Melissa Santos. He was making his way to the ring until Sexy Star made the save. Eventually, Pentagon defeated Sexy Star in a submission match. He went up to her after the match in an attempt to make yet another sacrifice, and it's here where Vampiro finally snaps, gets up from his desk, and stops Pentagon dead in his tracks. Personally, I would have liked to see Sexy Star get her arm snapped here, so she could have known what it felt like, and maybe she wouldn't have done it to Rosemary, but I digress. At the end of that episode, you see a segment with Vampiro in the back, struggling with keeping his demon inside because of all the harm he had caused throughout his career. A battle internally between being Vampiro or being Ian Hodgkinson. The following weeks would consist of Pentagon constantly trying to goad Vampiro into accepting his challenge for a match, and Vampiro shutting it down time and time again. Vampiro had these neat little segments where he'd interview the wrestlers. He had one with Pentagon in an attempt to clear the air, and Pentagon took this opportunity to challenge him to a match yet again, this time at the first ever Ultima Lucha event to culminate season 1, and calling him a coward if he declined, which he did. Later on, the show was going off the air. Pentagon appeared behind Vampiro and delivered a pinpoint roundhouse kick to take him down. He grabs a chair and assaults Vampiro with it before pulling out a jug of gasoline and pouring it all over his body, a callback to Vampiro's WCW days and his feud with Sting. He grabs a mic and tells him to either accept his challenge or he would light him on fire in front of the entire world. I forgot to include this into the original recording, but during season 1, obviously Lucha Underground were introducing all their titles, including the Gift of the Gods Championship. 7 wrestlers fought for the 7 ancient Aztec medallions that would go into the championship, with the winner of the title being able to cash in for a future Lucha Underground championship shot whenever they wanted. I believe it had to be 1 week in advance if I remember correctly. It's similar to how TNA had Option C used for the X Division title. The point of me mentioning this is that Pentagon had no interest in fighting for the Gift of the Gods title, and his mind was only set on one thing, and that was redemption from his master. The next week, Pentagon and Vampiro meet in the middle of the ring, where he breaks the news to Pentagon that Ian Hodgkinson would not be facing him at Ultima Lucha. However, the person that he would be facing would be the uncensored, unfiltered Vampiro of old, promising to kick his ass all over the temple and chokeslamming Pentagon in the middle of the temple to end the segment. And with that, the stage is set. Vampiro will have his first singles match in 2 years, in what would be his only Lucha Underground match against Pentagon Jr. in a Cero Miedo match where everything is legal and falls count anywhere. This would take place during part 2 of the inaugural Ultima Lucha, aired on August 5th, 2015, and emanated from the temple in Boyle Heights, California. I think that's everything we need going into it, and with all that out of the way, let's get into the match. Pentagon makes his entrance first, donning a white t-shirt, which is rather unusual for him considering his usual black attire. attire. Vampiro was next out, decked out in his traditional face paint, and dressed like if the Pope had risen from the dead. He enters the ring, Pentagon grabs a chair from underneath the ring, enters to smack Vampiro in the back with it, and the bell rings. He repeatedly hits Vampiro with that chair before kicking his legs out from under him, sending him rolling out of the ring. Pentagon throws the chair out of the ring and makes his way to ringside to continue assaulting Vampiro with that chair. Pentagon follows Vampiro out into the stands, where they both exchange strikes, but Pentagon is just delivering stronger ones to get the better of Vamp. He eats a chop from Pentagon, turns his back on him to recover, and it's here where play-by-play commentator Matt Stryker drops a very interesting line.
Well, my father always said you turn your back on a man you're not afraid of. Vampiro turning his back on the man who has zero fear.
They make their way back to ringside. Pentagon kicks Vampiro square in the head, lifts up the protective padding to expose the concrete floor below, gets Vampiro in a fireman's carry, and practically delivers an attitude adjustment right there onto the floor. He throws chair after chair to the limp body of Vampiro, places one of them to the side of the back, and swings home run after home run like it's the 2024 World Series and his name's Freddie Freeman. Referee Rick Knox puts up the dreaded X symbol and immediately goes in to check on Vampiro. Pentagon sends Knox away, grabs a nearby cable, and proceeds to choke Vampiro with it as medical personnel take their sweet ass time getting to ringside. As he's getting stretchered off, Vamp says, "Fuck that," attacks the man wheeling him off, and makes his way back to the ring as the temple cheers him on. As he enters, Pentagon goes for a clothesline that Vampiro ducks, runs into the ropes, and delivers his signature spinning heel kick to Pentagon. He grabs that little black bag that can only contain a few different things in wrestling. This one is the classic thumbtacks. He spreads them across the canvas, picks Pentagon up, and delivers a scoop slam onto those thumbtacks. He goes up to the top, attempts a corkscrew senton, but Pentagon moves and Vampiro lands back first onto those tags. Pentagon goes underneath the ring, and if you're a regular viewer of this channel, he pulls out a relatively familiar weapon, light tubes. We talked about home runs earlier. Pentagon hits a grand slam right into the fucking skull of Vampiro. You see the powder glass and mercury from those tubes floating around the temple as you see blood begin to form on the skull of Vampiro as Pentagon approaches him and digs that broken tube into his wound. Blood comes off onto the forearm of Pentagon and he licks it clean off, much to the disgust of the believers. Pentagon delivers jabs to a kneeled Vampiro who isn't selling it that much until Pentagon takes his head off with a wicked roundhouse. He grabs more light tubes from underneath the ring, slides them into the ring as Vampiro gets to his feet. Pentagon re-enters, delivers kicks to the hamstring that had previously taken Vampiro down, chops that had previously dazed him, and headbutts that were doing little damage. They both exchanged vicious knife-edge chops before Pentagon got the better of the exchange. He props up some light tubes in the corner, attempts to whip Vampiro into them. Vampiro is able to stop his own momentum and hip tosses Penta right into those tubes and into the turnbuckles. With that white shirt, you begin to see the blood pouring out of the body of Pentagon Jr. Vampiro begins to pull away at the mask of Pentagon, nearly ripping it off entirely and exposing Pentagon's face, and while that's viewed as disrespectful in Lucha Libre, that's not at all the intention here. Vampiro grabs the other stack of light tubes, squares up, and drives him right into the exposed face of Pentagon. The blood shows himself instantly all over Pentagon's gear and mask as he delivers a low blow to Vampiro just to get some separation. He goes up to the top to attempt some form of offense, but not before Vampiro meets him up there. He gets Pentagon to his feet, they both reach the top rope, and Vampiro connects with a belly-to-belly variant onto the broken glass and thumbtacks below. If you think that's where the violence peaked, wait until you see this. Vampiro goes to the outside of the ring, slides in a table, a lighter, and lighter fluid, stands the table up, douses it in that lighter fluid, and sets it on fire. Before he has any time to think about his next move though, Vampiro is grabbed by Pentagon and he slams him right through that burning table, leaving him to roll out to the outside as the crew begin to extinguish his burning body. Pentagon goes to the outside, attempts what I believe to be the only pinfall of this match, and it's enough to get a 3 count and the win. After the match, Pentagon rolls back into the ring, grabs a mic, and calls out for his master. Vampiro rolls back into the ring and screams at Penta, daring him to break his arm like he had done to so many others throughout the season. Pentagon obliges, albeit confused, snapping his arm before going back to calling out yet again for his master. It's here where Vampiro gets up, grabs a mic, and says to Pentagon the following.
Pentagon! You're looking for your teacher. Well, let me tell you something. As your teacher, I tell you. What? You are ready, my son.
What? Vampiro is the master?
And there it is. 39 episodes. months upon months of Pentagon making countless sacrifices to this unidentified master, and it's revealed during the final episode of season 1 to be none other than Vampiro himself. The entire season was Vampiro slowly testing Pentagon Jr. to get him ready for his final and toughest task, taking out his own teacher. In this match, this moment, this passing of the torch from teacher to student that solidified Pentagon Jr. as a household name and a top guy in the world of Lucha Underground. Before I get a little too far ahead of myself, let's discuss this match really quickly. As we talked about earlier, Vampiro was never the strongest in-ring worker, even in his physical prime, but especially as a 47, 48-year-old man with countless injuries and concussions spanning decades. What he lacked in a moveset, however, he more than made up for in this match with his storytelling ability. For the entire first half of this match, Vampiro was not at all who he was supposed to be. He wasn't the Canadian vampire, he was family man Ian Hodgkinson. When Pentagon was done beating him down initially and he was being wheeled off, that was the last we'd see of Ian. However, it was just the beginning of Vampiro showing in this match. Thumbtacks, light tubes, fire that ended up becoming his undoing, the sick bastard that Ian thought he had left for dead in the back of his mind came out to play. To a good chunk of fans, this is considered to be the greatest match in the career of Vampiro. That said, as much as he did his part in making this match and program a success, I'd be remiss to not acknowledge the performance that Pentagon Jr. played in all of this. From the moment he came back after eating loss after loss at the beginning of the season, it was all building to this match where he could finally earn redemption. Not just against Vampiro for halting his sacrifice of Sexy Star, I still wish he did it, but for his own shortcomings. This is where he could repay the man who helped put him back on track for success after it was shortly derailed, and the violence exhibited throughout this match was a reflection as to what he was taught and what he was capable of. Living up to his credo, he truly did have zero fear, cero miedo, and it was personified in this match. In my opinion, this is the second most violent match Lucha Underground has ever put on, and if Killshot vs. Dante Fox had never happened, it would absolutely take the #1 spot in my opinion. It's one of the best wrestling stories told on American soil in this past decade, one that will probably be imitated, but it'll never be duplicated. This is the measuring stick when it comes to older wrestlers putting over younger ones and making them look like $1,000,000, and that's what makes it even crazier to think that this almost never even happened. According to Vampiro on the Steve Austin podcast in 2016, Pentagon had another opponent planned for Ultima Lucha, but whoever it was backed out of the match. Vampiro insisted on being Pentagon's opponent so he could try and help get him over even further with a crowd that was slowly beginning to cheer him more and more every week despite him being a villain. Vampiro also said in April of this year on the 83 Weeks podcast that Pentagon was close to being fired from Lucha Underground due to not being able to grasp the American style initially. I don't want to say something along the lines of Vampiro saved Pentagon's career, because Pentagon was and is a very talented, capable, and charismatic performer that almost definitely would have found work in the United States. However, you do have to wonder what the direction for his career would have been had he not had this launching pad. Even if you look at his success post Lucha Underground, he's a former world heavyweight and tag team champion in TNA, then known as Impact Wrestling, a former tag champion in MLW, formerly 1/2 and 1/3 of the World Tag Team and World Trios champions in AEW respectively. He is currently signed to WWE, where he is probably the most popular luchador to work for that company since Rey Mysterio, and that's not even touching his independent work. Once again, it's obviously not impossible for this to have happened, but it likely would have been much more difficult. In case anyone's wondering what Vampiro was up to in 2025, the crazy bastard's still wrestling. Not on a frequent basis or anything, but he wrestled 33 matches last year and 7 so far this year. He has been diagnosed with the beginning stages of Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, CTE from the dozens of concussions during his career, 86% of his body is plagued by arthritis, the whole 9 yards. It's batshit insane what he's doing, but he does want to end his career on his own terms, so I respect it. I wish him the absolute best. But yeah, that was Pentagon Jr. versus Vampiro. What did you think? Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you thought about this video, as I look for all feedback, positive or negative. If you did enjoy it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already, so you do not miss out on any future videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Peace out.